Going to begin. Tonight we welcome first Sarah Allaback. She's an author and historian specializing in architectural and landscape preservation. Grew up in Carpinteria, California, and now lives in Amherst, Massachusetts. Please welcome Sarah Allaback. Joining her is co-author Monique F. Parsons. She's a journalist and an award-winning audio producer and avocado farmer. She's a native of Carpinteria and she currently lives in suburban Chicago. Please welcome Monique. Joining them in conversation is a teacher of literature from Kate School, Brooks Hansen. He's an accomplished author. He's authored 10 books. He's made the best book of the New York Times list. And this fall, he was also a Guggenheim Fellow. And this fall, his latest book, Lucid Dream, is coming out. So please come back for fall to talk to Brooks. But for now, welcome Brooks Hansen.
Thank you, Michael. I want to thank the store, and I just want to congratulate you two on what you've done. I think anytime a book comes out, the first congratulation goes to the idea that the two of you had an idea, and you have an idea, and then 2 years later, 3 years, I actually don't know how long it's 4 years later, you've got yourself a book. But in addition to having created something out of nothing, let it be noted, well, this one's getting some nice reviews and stands as a sort of beautiful, comprehensive history. Although, when did we start this one? Around 1890s? Would you say is the starting point?
Right. We also go back to the ancient Aztecs.
The ancient Aztecs, but a comprehensive telling from about the 1890s right up. Part of the fun here is that it takes us right up to the present day. So, congratulations, and we're going to start to have a conversation. And I think at some point we can open up to you guys because we had a terrific talk about a month ago. I just want to sort of recreate the fun of that. First, by way of disclosure, is the fun that all that we have in common is that I too have some Carpinterian roots. I too was born of avocado people, as the two of you were. We've got Kate School in common, class of
84.
And I currently teach there. And the other thing we have in common is that I too collaborated once. My first book was a collaboration, and I want to talk to you about how the collaboration works. But first, let's just maybe get to know you. Let's start easy. First, memories of the avocado?
Yeah, I can start. I have so many, having grown up on an avocado farm in Carpinteria, I have many early avocado memories, but one that we were chatting about and enjoying recently is there was a tree in our orchard that was right off the corner of our house that when I was very little, it was a perfect climbing tree, and it had, I think a lot of people who grew up around avocados know how wonderful they are for climbing. And it had some low branches, so when I was very small, I could clamber up, and then as I got bigger, I could get a little higher, and I felt very protected by the canopy, but could still see the back door. And I named it Mr. Tree, and Mr. Tree became ill as there was a very terrible root fungus that continues to be a concern in California orchards, and there's a dramatic chapter in the book that describes the battle around that disease. But my father kept this tree alive until I was too old to climb trees, and we eventually let it go, and it was just quite recently knocked down, but I saved a little limb of it. I just felt I needed to keep a relic, so Mr. Tree lives on.
And I also climbed Mr. Tree. Did not know
We
Mr.
climbed
Tree by that
together.
name.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
might have been hiding it because
Yeah.
we were much older.
Yeah.
So, and those were pleasant memories. But what stands out for me was running in the big avocado road race in 1978 when I was 12 years old. Carpinteria, my little town, staged a genuine race, and I was part of the Carpinteria Runners Club, and entered the race, ran past the orchards of avocados, won my age group, and then was presented with my prize, a big bag of avocados. And at that moment, for me, I just had a kind of epiphany of the value of the fruit, green gold.
Right.
That's what it was. I'll never forget it.
And how about you? We want to hear your
oh,
first
yours.
avocado.
You know a little bit. Yeah, right.
So my connection again is that my grandfather had an avocado ranch out here. So I think I'd always known it. Maybe my first memory of it was the attitude that New Yorkers, because I was born and raised in New York, the attitude that New Yorkers brought to avocados back then in the early 70s. And I had a best friend who didn't like them. And he said, I can't imagine why anybody would eat that. It tastes like cold cream. And I have to admit, I thought, that's actually a pretty good description of a bad avocado.
Yes.
But I've always thought, but you need to come. I need to come with me. We'll go to the land of the avocado, and you shall taste something that's far better than cold cream. It's got this sort of magical quality.
Yeah.
And did he? Did he change his mind?
Oh, he's not good at changing. Tried that.
But you tried.
Yeah. And then I think what you also may be referencing is, so we got married out here. I married into sort of Cape royalty, and at our wedding we had Spencer the Gardener played, pretty cool. And then because we had that connection, Spencer the Gardener, you may not know, wrote a song called the Avocado Song, and he made a video of the Avocado Song that my children, my daughter's here, and their cousins, their father's here. There's a video that exists online of all these children swinging on an avocado tree singing the Avocado Song, and if we're lucky, maybe I can teach it to you. It's pretty easy. It's catchy. But in any case, you've already let one cat out of the bag here, which is that you are old friends who then decided to collaborate. So let's dig in right there. Who pitched this to whom, and then let's talk about how you actually went about writing.
And I think the way back story, since Sarah and I have known each other since 3rd grade, main school in Carpinteria, we became very good friends, especially in 6th grade. And my mother, at some point, said, "You girls should write a book together." And so that we mentioned at the end of our book, but that was a seed that was planted. But a few years ago, my husband was like, "Why has no one written a sort of really rich narrative history, nonfiction narrative of the avocado and the people about the avocado that sort of made the avocado happen?" And like, "You should do that." So I thought about it, and I was like, "Yes, I can do that, but I want to do it with Sarah." So I called Sarah, and
Sarah said no.
Sarah said no.
I did not see any potential.
Yes.
I couldn't find a story. But time went by, and you were persuasive.
Yeah.
And in the end, I agreed to try. And I started writing a history of Southern and Northern California horticulture from the beginning, and searching for the avocado in the missions, which I'm sure I would find, and just came up with something that I read it. It was unreadable to me. It was boring. It was omniscient. There were no people, and so I momentarily gave up. And then we, I think, jointly discovered an amazing character who is the star of the first half of the book and actually continues to the present in certain ways. His name's Wilson Popenoe, and he was a nurseryman, a plant explorer, a spy for the U.S. Navy, an educator in Honduras, a long list of achievements. And we stumbled upon his papers at Carnegie Mellon University's Hunt Institute for Botanical Documentation. And they had completely digitized his archive. So I just took one look at the first letter he wrote, and I knew it was him. He gave us the story.
And then our collaboration, sort of as a journalist, I spent a lot of time following people through orchards. Some of the people in this room I followed through orchards. And the shout out to Robert Abbott, who really is the avocado farmer on our farm, who takes care and raises our beautiful Hass avocados. But I also, so I traveled, I did interviews, I just kept talking to people while Sarah was immersed in this wonderful archive, and we kind of blended our skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, you may be getting a sense of their backgrounds. You kind of have in Sarah, you have to typecast you for the movie. You're kind of the book one, the research, the school.
That's right.
glasses. And you're the gumshoe.
Gumshoe, yeah.
With a background in journalism, so the one of you who's willing to just scour the globe and take the walk, and that's you, and you're willing to endlessly look through it.
But we really needed the Globetrotter.
Yeah.
Because this is so current. And that was one of our pressures throughout, was knowing that avocado mania wouldn't last forever. I mean, there had to be something. We had to be timely. And Monique did an amazing job of looking for that.
It might last
We're
forever.
hoping. Okay, that's me being doubtful. But it was more when we were thinking about consumption of goods. We amassed quite a fortune of merchandise at Avocado Road. And yet, I still see that even in the store. I just picked up the avocado mention, little game they're selling.
So you mentioned that you were, part of the frustration at the outset was you couldn't find the story, and then you find Wilson. And so, because you can also talk a little bit about how the actual writing got done. It's one thing to say that you could do the globetrotting and you could do the research, but you've got, the book itself kind of has two stories going on it. There's, I would say, in Wilson Pocono, that's almost the story of the search for the perfect fruit.
For the perfect avocado for the industry, and he was obsessed with finding the wild avocado. And that was the kind of holy grail that would lead him to the origin of the species and solve all sorts of problems, like how do we develop a hardy rootstock? How do we, and by hardy I mean one that withstands cold temperatures and disease and so forth. And so that was an ongoing quest for him. He kept finding wild avocados and thinking it was the one, and then there'd be another and another. And finally, when he got old enough, he just said, well, I'm not going to find it, but we just have to know that there's always something next to search for, that the perfect avocado could be better. So he always knew that. The Fuerte could be improved. The Hass became the next important avocado. And even in a book he wrote, a manual of tropical and subtropical fruit, written in 1920, it got reprinted in the 70s, and at the end of it he wrote, in 2024 people will probably still be looking for the next variety.
And they are.
And then you can even say a word about that. There are many new ones.
Constant research going on at University of California at some of the top nurseries to find better varieties for eating and for these root stocks, which are really important.
And is there, I mean, the fun of this is I think there actually is a tree. Is there a mecca?
Oh, is there a mecca? Yes, yeah.
Well, the Fuerte tree, born in Atlixco, Mexico in the 1880s, it was cared for by Alejandro LeBlanc, who was not probably the person who grew it, but cared for it. And the Pocono family, I have to go back a little and explain that they were from Topeka, Kansas. They moved to past Altadena, and they set up a nursery called West India Gardens. And it was also a government testing site, which meant that the USDA was coming in to first inspect their nursery, but then giving them actual specimens to test and see if they could grow a variety that would suit California. So the West India Gardens, run by Fred Pocono, Wilson's father, sent a man to Mexico to look for different varieties. He ended up sending back 30 different varieties, and one of them was the Fuerte. That's the name for the first part of our book. And the Fuerte became the most popular avocado in California for the next 50 years, until the early 1970s when the Hass surpassed it. So that's a mecca, and there was a lot of travel to visit the tree.
And speaking of mecca, like true pilgrimages, as Sarah writes about, and they laid memorial plaques at the foot of the tree, and then in the second half, which we built around the Hass avocado, there also that mother tree, parent tree, which is in La Habra Heights in LA County, also became kind of a pilgrimage site, and there was a commemorative plaque there. And
Is the original tree is not there?
It's gone. Yes, it has gone on. But you can still, speaking of relics, you can still purchase a piece of it, maybe made into a plaque or a pencil cup or from the California Avocado Society, and so that wood is kept in an undisclosed location that I was allowed to visit, but it's still treasured, and it's given out as it's made into gavels sometimes that these avocado boards use their meetings.
And the fuerte tree as well, right?
I'm looking at you skeptically.
It's true.
You believe all those people.
No, but there was also a fuerte
believe.
gavel. I've got to say, there was a fuerte gavel as well.
Yeah.
They were both gavels, remember?
I believe it because I know the provenance, and I know I spoke to the guy who knows the guy.
It's part of the crucifix.
It's real. It was.
So you've already mentioned, so we've got Wilson Pomino, and we've got the search for the perfect fruit, which really isn't just the perfect fruit, it's the perfect tree. It's the tree that's gonna not
Help
only
launch
yield the best fruit, but also it's gonna live heartily. Second half of the book, we get to the other charisma, which is it Brokaw or the Brokaw family?
Yeah, I would say the Brokaw family starting, yes, and so the sort of as Popino becomes sort of the protagonist of the first half, I would say the Brokaw family, starting with, my half starts with Hank Brokaw, who founded an incredibly important nursery in Ventura County. In his story, he was from Whittier, down south. He was supposed to be a doctor. He went to Harvard, didn't care for medical school. Eventually makes his way back to Ventura County, becomes a teacher, a high school teacher, and can't stop thinking about these avocados that his uncle had grown in collaboration with a man named Rudolph Hass. And so this delicious avocado that his uncle's nursery had helped propagate, Hank Brokaw became this innovator, sort of blended a love for avocados with a very sort of scientific and creative, innovative approach to how to launch this to the industry. And so with his wife Ellen, who Hank passed away, but his wife Ellen I spoke to several times for the book, and his son Rob, who now manages the nursery. It's now the world's largest, what they call clonal avocado nursery, with sites in Spain, Ventura, and Jalisco now. So, and it's clonal because every Hass avocado we eat is made from trees that have been cloned, which really just means grafted. So pieces of budwood have been taken originally from the mother tree and then passed down and copied over and over and over again.
Let's get to the bloody stuff.
Okay,
The
yes.
conflict.
Yes.
So, but also in the Brokaw half of the book,
Yes.
competition, conflict, geopolitics
Yes.
enters in to a
Yes.
degree.
Yes. So at the same time that the California industry was revving up and going, the Mexicans were, of course, also thinking about, we have these wonderful fruit and we have this incredible many kinds of indigenous avocados. And so as the Mexicans build up their industry, it became this drive to open up the United States market. And so one thing we didn't mention that you may have read about, but in 1914 there was a quarantine put on Mexican avocados because of a seed weevil that was very dangerous to the orchards that the Californians didn't want getting up here. So this fight to open the border, which was a lot of work on the behalf of the Mexican industry, hours and days and thousands of trees were tested, but while that all was happening, a pretty terrible, drug cartel industry was also growing up in Michoacan. And so for the last couple of decades, the avocado region has also unfortunately been kind of a dangerous region for violence and drugs. So there's a whole chapter describing that, and it's something that the industry has to contend with.
Well, and then you've also got a campaign from California trying to stop, doing what it can to stop
exactly
the Mexican avocado
Yes.
from coming in. And the claims really being about, we can't let this infestation
Right.
cross the border. It's going to ruin everything.
Right.
How do we? I'd be interested in your take on how that all got resolved.
Yeah. I mean, as one of the growers I talked to was sort of part of all that said to me, he's like, we were fighting like crazy in these public hearings trying to keep the Mexican fruit out, and in the parking lot we would say, like, which is a big part of the story, and others, Mission Produce, had already opened packing houses down in Mexico, and they were packing Mexican fruit to go to Asia or to go to Canada. They were literally driving trucks through the United States to get to Canada to deliver fruit to their stores. So the collaboration was already happening, and it was happening as far back as in the Pocono days when people were learning from each other about these trees and orchards. So it was worked out practically, and then it was also worked out where the Californians pushed for a marketing order. So now everyone who brings avocados into the U.S. has to pay 2.5 cents per pound to a marketing fund, and so do the Californians. But which is why we see a lot of Super Bowl ads and things like that. So it was. They realized a way that money could be made, and that avocados could be here for everyone. So.
Well, my experience reading it was you keep wanting the conflict to be the more bloody conflict, like you stay away from our business with the
Yes.
shoe. And it winds up, I feel like the real conflict in the book is within each farmer, between a somewhat capitalist impulse to protect their land, but also a love of husbandry and a love of agriculture that causes them to keep compromising and befriending and sharing.
Yeah.
Because everything winds up being shared when the humans.
I mean,
It was a really close community.
it was. I mean, in one of the, during some of this fierce, bad time of battle where the California Avocado Commission was putting some pretty inflammatory ads, shall we say, sort of pushing back on the Mexican industry. There was this avocado congress that happens every 4 years, and Hank Brokaw, who I mentioned, kind of lovingly created copies of the Hass mother tree and put them in tubes and gave them as gifts to people from 20 avocado producing countries. And some of those trees I was able to track down, but one's growing in South Africa right now. And so it was, it was bigger than politics. It was bigger than money. It was a true love of a love of the avocado, Brooks.
Well, in 1948, for one of the pilgrimages to the Fuerte, the association brought 15 Fuerte trees and planted them in important locations.
Right.
Yeah, that was after the Fuerte had died.
The Mexican governor's house,
the
right?
Mexican
Or the Mexican president.
Yes.
Yes.
And the park and so yeah, it has a long
It
history.
does feel, every day you feel like they want to fight, but they just can't stop sharing throughout the book.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, should we look inside? Should we read some
Sure.
bits and then
All
open the floor up to questions?
Sounds
to
great.
that?
So,
And well, as you look for your parts, did you catch how the collaboration actually worked? There was a little mention. I think you used the word "my half."
my half. which
Wait, we have to.
we should
explain that.
let's slow down. But yes, we did divide the book. We wrote it chronologically in the end. After we weren't sure we were going to do it that way, and ended up. So the Fuerte was Sarah, and I became the Hass. We constantly shared our writing, constantly talked about it. I brought threads from Sarah's part up to mine, and vice versa, and we worked really hard to make sure. So hopefully when you read it, which we would be delighted if you did, we worked hard to make sure the voice felt like one voice.
And early on, it wasn't divided by the trees. We just had split it each other and were working to connect everything. But then the trees they became more and more human to us. We started to feel the emotions that the owners were feeling. We got close to them, and we suddenly thought, they're characters in the book in their own way. And so we built that up and really liked the way it felt.
Yeah, and it's no part of the reader's experience. It doesn't feel like I have to.
Thank you. That's the best thing you could say. Because we're
And I'm envious of that. And as I say, I did collaborate on our book, and when I heard that you sort of split duties on the two half, I thought, well, I wish I thought of that one. That's a lot easier.
And we didn't fight.
we have
All right, so let's prove it.
So, let's see. During the summer, Wilson enjoyed the company of his Pomona College friend Ralph Cornell, who was working at the nursery to help pay for his education. The young men made trips up the coast to Santa Barbara, where they stayed in a hotel on State Street. and visited Francesco Franceschi's at his home and nursery on Mission Ridge Road. The famous plantsman met them at the old mission, the end of the streetcar line, and crowded together in his tiny phaeton, pulled by an elderly sorrel horse, they made their way up a winding road to the Riviera. Monterioso covered 40 acres, 10 of which were a cultivated wonderland of plant introductions. When Franceschi left Italy with his family in 1891, he spent 2 years in Los Angeles before choosing Santa Barbara as the destination most similar to his native land and most likely to support a range of species. Inspired by the region's seemingly endless potential for nurturing semi-tropical fruits, Franceschi founded the Southern California Acclimatizing Association, an international plant business specializing in raising from seed rare and beautiful plants from every country of the globe. He was soon a voice for the nascent avocado industry, announcing in the World Cultivator that in the culture of the aguacate, Santa Barbara takes the lead in California, and including the Persea gratissima from Mexico, the well-known aguacate or alligator pear in the Southern California Acclimatizing Association's 1894 catalog. By the time Wilson and Cornell visited Monterioso in 1911, Franceschi was operating his nursery from his home, a property featuring more than 200 plants he introduced to the state, more than any other California nurseryman. Here, the young men gawked at the gigantic spiked agave with its sinuous relative, the agave attenuata, both reaching magnificent dimensions. The rare Montezuma cypress, or ironwood, Franceschi had obtained from Santa Cruz Island. His popular Lepia repens, and his most famous introduction, the pineapple guava. The Persea gratissima, later known as Persea americana, was coming to him from tropical America and selling for 50 cents as a potted seedling. Franceschi not only inspired Wilson, but also helped West India Gardens develop into a highly regarded regional nursery by sharing plants, knowledge, and camaraderie.
And I'll read a little bit from about, this is a scene from Brokaw Nursery, which we mentioned earlier. Consuelo Mendez sat in Brokaw Nursery's greenhouse at a small table. In her right hand was a grafting blade that resembled a delicate X-Acto knife. Over her right thumb, she wore a protective rubber sleeve. Beside her was a pile of grass green sticks. The sticks, each about the length of a pencil, were clipped from the mother block, a grove of Hass trees behind the nursery that are grown for this purpose. The Hass trees of this orchard never fruit and rarely flower. Instead, they are pruned back hard in the late summer, forcing them to put their energy into making new branches through late fall and winter. Come spring, the tender new shoots are sturdy enough to clip and are used as budwood. Each tree helps grow about 200 new trees. The process repeats every summer. On plastic trays in front of Mendez, grafted rootstocks emerged from black tubes of soil like spindly green fingers. One by one, she picks a piece of budwood, deftly cut a T into the rootstocks, spliced them together, and wound a length of rubber clockwise around the junction to seal the wound. At top speed, she could graft 900 trees a day, while her most able colleagues managed 500 or 600. Mendez has trained them all. She trained her boss, too. Rob Brokaw was 12 years old when Mendez arrived at the nursery, and when his kids were old enough, she also showed them how to graft budwood. Videos of her grafting have been sent to Viveros Brokaw, Brokaw's sister nursery in Spain, the world's largest clonal avocado nursery, and to nurseries throughout the world that have licensed its rootstock. Mendez has worked at Brokaw Nursery for more than 50 years, and when she began, about 40 people worked there, and clonal rootstock wasn't sold commercially. In 2024, she was one of 140 employees, not including colleagues, at Brokaw's nurseries in Spain and Jalisco. Cesar Chavez once lived in Oxnard, a few miles from Brokaw Nursery. Although born in Yuma, Arizona, he picked avocados and walnuts there as a boy before following his family in the harvest north to San Francisco. Mendez followed the fruit too, although her journey was longer. She was 24 years old when she knocked on Hank Brokaw's door in 1968 looking for a job. She and her husband, desperate for work, had left their small children with family in Michoacan to come north, and Mendez quickly learned she hated working in the strawberry fields. Start tomorrow, Hank told them. Mendez watched and asked questions and learned fast. At 79, her fingers are sometimes stiff, but when Rob asks if she wants to slow down, she says no. She was proud of her work. Smiling, she said she enjoyed urging the others to move faster. If all goes well, 2 years after Mendez makes her grass, the young trees will leave Brocon Nursery and find a new home in a farmer's orchard. Given her pace, Rob figured it was likely that Mendez's hands have knit together more than 1 million Hass avocado trees. Together, those trees have produced hundreds of millions of avocados. I feel happy, she said, when she reflected on the impact of her work. My hands have touched many countries.
That's cool.
It's a beautiful portrait. I love also that image of the tree that itself bears no fruit,
I know.
but that gives its wood to the stem. There's something. It's like a Shel Silverstein poem. All right. Well, I open it to the floor now. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Have other countries tried to create their own type of avocado to dominate the world? The Australians.
I mean, it's interesting what I learned from traveling, and also what we saw in the California Avocado Society yearbooks, that even from the beginning had dispatches from around the world. I think there's always experimentation going on, so there are varieties that you'll find in different countries that are not what we see here, and we may be the only country where like Hass is like so dominant, but nothing has yet approached its stature. but yeah, and in California, that's part of our joy is there's an amazing array that you can find if you go to like a farmer's market, or even in local markets in California, you can find some different kinds.
You can also buy the specialty boxes.
Yeah.
The Brocon Nursery and other
Yeah.
places at Riverside. I had an amazing box of Fuertes from Riverside.
Yeah.
And what's the full address?
What is that? I can't remember the name of it, but Avoha or
I
avocado.
think it was Aloha.
Close.
Aloha.
Yeah, we're both getting very close.
Anyway.
Brocon Nursery also does, because they have a lot of the trees that Hank had planted back in the day, and they send out variety boxes that are beautiful.
And the Fuerte, I hadn't tasted it, so Monique sent me the box.
And you liked
was-
it.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful, very thin skin, delicate, and a lovely color. I mean, it was kind of, romantic is the word that came to mind when I opened it up. But the thin skin won't chip well, so it'll never be a super big, brand name avocado.
Right. Well, and before the foreign countries established their own groves, you do have stories of shipping.
Yes.
Where you found, this is a tough crowd when it comes to this, because you know more than I do about how easy it is to ship or how well they survive. But I'm thinking, it can't be good, but in the time it takes to get to, where is it, the Netherlands? Is that where one of the shipping was?
Yeah.
But maybe it can't.
Yeah, I mean,
You know better now.
the professor I followed at University of California, Riverside, who's the real avocado expert, most of her career has been post-harvest handling of fruit, which I thought sounded very dull, and then I spent time with her and realized, it's really important how the avocado is treated along the way, so that'll make the difference in whether it tastes good. But
I brought along an amazing avocado, a daily avocado, and its control. Just a second. The Hass. And this was from the Parsons Ranch.
we have one tree that produces these
It's a very
wild,
short tree.
Yes,
You know,
yeah,
I mean, how
yeah.
tall do you think the tree is?
10 feet tall. I mean, it's
10
not
feet
that
tall maybe,
yeah.
and you go under, it's an umbrella of these hanging
Yeah.
out.
Wow.
So I've had a great time picking them and admiring
Yeah.
them.
How should one care? Hi, Monique.
Hi.
How should one care for the fruit before it's ripe?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because while working on this, I learned really as delicately as possible. I spoke to Rick Bayless, who you may have not heard of. He's a famous chef in Chicago, and he has a PBS show. And he was telling me when he's very particular about where his avocados come from, and he loves the ones from Mexico. He apologized to me. I was like, it's okay. But he said when they come into his kitchen, he tells everyone, don't even look at them. Don't touch them, don't look at them until they are ready and perfectly ripe, and then we'll open them. But it's also, you can put them, you know, in a refrigerator to slow which I had never done. I thought that would mess them up, but I don't know. We have other experts here. But refrigerating will slow down the ripening process if you want to hang on, and that's how the grocery stores and the shipping companies treat them too. So
They don't like to be looked at.
they don't just don't throw. I do every time now. It's like if someone throws them in the grocery bag, I'm like, oh yeah.
And also they package them in Excelsior, and they've been doing that since the 1890s. That's wood shavings that are fine, and that very much helps the condition for them to arrive safely.
I have a question. My name is Belinda. I went to Kate a couple years after you guys did, maybe 1 year overlap. So I'm a little bit old, but when I was a kid, avocados were kind of special for people who were not from California, and they, you know, you take them and you give them an avocado, and it was like special. And now avocados are everywhere, and I think that's because they've improved the ability to ship them other places. And I'm curious, like, what's the role in like refrigerated trucks to get them to, let's say, the Midwest? Because clearly Midwesterners now like avocados. And how did that develop? Because it developed in the last 50 years, as far as I can tell from my personal experience.
It's been really important, the ability to ship in refrigerated trucks. But I think the real, and this is in the book, but it's opening to Mexico was the real game changer for why we're seeing them everywhere. Because their capacity, their ability to grow at great scale and bring them over makes a real difference. But it was interesting. I was just speaking to someone in the grocery industry who was saying, like, even though they are so ubiquitous, like, people, even when prices go up, people still like need their avocados. They might buy a smaller one, or they might go conventional instead of organic. But there is this really interesting addiction that people seem to have. But the sort of delight that people have over seeing an avocado, it has changed because they're everywhere, and that's why it's kind of fun to show them the different varieties. Because a lot of people they think it's only, like in the Midwest, I'll be talking about the book there in a few days. I think a lot of people will think there's only one avocado. So, we know better.
Thank you.
I have a question. This may be a little beyond this. We're talking about avocados here and in Mexico, but the first time I went to the East Coast, to New York, my great aunt came from the store with an avocado pear that she called it, this big, smooth skin, watery, yucky thing. And then in the 80s, I lived for a while in North Florida, and all they could get was those. So have Haas and Fuerte kind of spread out?
Well,
I know they're in the Midwest because I lived in Chicago too. But in Florida and the eastern seaboard?
so the ones that you were calling watery were West Indian variety avocados, and they're tropical. And so they're very different fruits. I mean, obviously they share that same name, but the flesh it's like wet, like you said. And that's because it has a lower oil content. And then the Mexican Guatemalan, which are often hybrids, those have the richer flavor and the different consistency because of the oil.
So our avocados being shipped to the southeast?
They are, they are.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly Mexican avocados are. It's a. I think California right now can only satisfy like 12% of the demand in the U.S. So, but you can find them on the East Coast still.
Well, we were in Scandinavia last summer, and I was somewhat amazed that in Stockholm, if you ever had a brunch at their hotels, it's amazing. They have everything under the sun, including huge wooden buckets of appeared to be Haas avocados. So I thought, these coming from Mexico, and take as many as you want.
Wow.
It wasn't, portioned out. You could take one or two, and maybe take one for your lunch and eat one for breakfast. I thought, are these coming from Israel, or has Mexico's reached that far?
I think I was traveling a little bit over the winter, and I noticed I was in Copenhagen, and I noticed they had Morocco and Spain. I was looking in the grocery store.
Oh, Morocco is a huge
Yes,
agricultural.
and then also some, I know, Africa, South Africa, Kenya, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen them
sends
there in Kenya
avocados
too.
up, and I
And
know,
they're huge.
yeah, and I know some Mexican avocados are going into Europe too. But the northern European Scandinavians, they're crazy about avocados.
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think this is more avocados than I've seen since.
Yeah.
Yeah, hilarious.
We'll take one more question.
I just have a question. I'm drawing parallels with the grape industry, but how vulnerable the fruit is to pests, aphids, bacteria, mold. We've got some changes happening to our standards as of this week. Are they extremely vulnerable to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think these root stocks, which we didn't talk that much about, but every Hass avocado is grafted onto the root stock, like we heard in that passage, and it's really important what kind of rootstock you grow the tree on, and the kinds that have been bred have been more resistant to the fungus. Nothing is completely impervious to it, but the research going on at University of California and also at Broke Nursery and elsewhere is trying to constantly figure out what are better rootstocks for different climates, and as you know, global warming and all of that too. So I think there are interesting parallels with the wine industry.
Standards to keep it healthy.
I think that's all the time we have for
Thank you guys for
questions.
coming.
We have lots of time for signing. So I want to say thank you and again, congratulations.